Hello, everybody. This is a recording to show sort of the basics of the different bouncing balls that we're doing for the bouncing ball assignment. Just to recap, we've got the rubber ball, the heavy ball, and the balloon. And I'm just going to run through very quickly how to animate each of those and how they differ from each other as a sort of a refresher for folks that are trying to get caught up or submitting late or something like that. So let's jump right into it. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and you should see the Maya user interface up on your screen right now. I'm going to go ahead and just stow my own view here. So let's see, stop share for a second, and I'm just going to turn off my video. There we go. So I'll make that nice and small. Share my screen now. There we go. So jumping it right into the setup here, I'm going to go panel orthographic side view here. I've got screen OSD going on so you can see what key presses I press up in the corner here. So as I'm doing camera controls and stuff like that, you'll see what buttons I'm pressing to do stuff within the demo. So let's go ahead, File, Reference Editor, and I'm going to reference in the character that we're using for this. I'm going to hit plus sign, and my current project is default here, so I'm just going to reference from the assets folder here, and there's that movie ball reference. And it knows sort of where to look based on setting my project. So if I go File, Set Project, I can go ahead and set it to my default project here. Although for me, I actually tend to work in my cloud storage drive. So if I go here to my computer, Google Drive, go Maya, Dropbox Maya project, there we go. And I'm going to go set it there. And so now whenever I say like file open scene, it's going to look in that Google Drive location. So, and when I go to look for an asset, it's going to look there. So I'm going to reference the Mooly ball from that location. And there's that Mooly ball there. Open and save. Okay. And so this guy here, you can see it's coming from my default project. So I can just go reference, replace reference, assets, say, give me that Mooly ball that's in my cloud drive there. Okay, so I'm going to be having three balls here in this scene, but I'm going to start with the rubber ball. So I'm going to go panel, orthographic, side view. I'm going to select the main control of the character, and I'm going to say turn off that squash, turn on that squash and stretch control, or rather turn off that tail. So I've got my squash and stretch control visible, and I've also got the main animation control visible. Now I notice you've probably experienced this trying to select the animation control when that squash and stretch control is there visible. It's kind of tricky. If you do that, it's going to grab the squash and stretch control. So I'm going to make a couple of buttons to make my life a little easier. I want one to select the main control and one to select the squash and stretch control. So I'm going to open up my script editor here, clicking an empty space, that's select minus CL. I'm going to middle mouse drag that down here. Clicking on the actual animation control, that's the command right there. So I'm going to paste that there as well. So now I've got that command in my script editor, and I'm just going to select it and then middle mouse drag it, hold up onto the shelf, boom, like that. And now I've got a button that selects that A control. So I'm going to just edit that button and say, hey, call it A main, like that. Save all shelves. So now I've got a button that if I click it, I can grab that main control. I'm going to do the same thing here for the squash and stretch control. So I'm going to take that squash and stretch command. I'm going to go like this, replace that command with squash and stretch, middle mouse drag up onto the shelf, and edit, call that A squash, like that. Save all shelves. So there I've got a button to select my animation control. I've got a button to select the squash and stretch control. And now that I've got that button to select the squash and stretch control, I'm going to go ahead and actually turn that squash and stretch control off. When I go to Playblast in my viewport here, I've got everything showing right now, but when I Playblast, I just want to make sure I have only NURB surface and polygons going on. And that squash and stretch control is hidden. So let's get into the animation of this. Now for this, I'm going to say the scene file for the bouncing ball is normally 144 frames here. But in my case, I'm going to specifically just do the first 100 frames of animation as part of the demo. I'm going to check my framing with the resolution gate here and sort of compose my scene, give myself enough room for this ball to sort of animate along. And I'm just going to have it bouncing along in the middle of the scene here. I could create a surface for it to go along, but I'm just going to assume that this sort of line here is my surface. Create polygon primitive, cube. Let's just scale that guy out. Boink, boink. boink, and boink, like that, just to make a nice thin platform for him to bounce along there, like that. Okay. And so I'm going to put some animation on him. Now, to help visualize, I'm going to need the graph editor to do some work later, but I'm also going to need the motion trail editor. So I'm going to go Window, Animation Editor, Motion Trail Editor. But for this, I'm going to hold down Control and Shift and then left mouse button click, boom, and there's that Motion Trail Editor, a button to launch that every time I need it. I'm also going to make one for the graph editor because I know that's going to come up later. So I'm going to Window, Animation Editor, Graph Editor, just Control, Shift, left mouse button click, and there's my graph editor button and my motion trail editor button. I'm going to select that main control. And remember, motion trails, you have to have something selected to know what the motion trail affects. So in this case, I have the animation control. I'm going to say create motion trail. And I need to make sure that I have in my viewport motion trails visible so I can see that stuff. So there's that motion trail there. It'll be on by default. And then as I set keys on my main control, you'll see that motion trail start to develop. So I'm going to hit S to key. I'm going to go to frame 20, just move him forward about this far. I'm going to go to frame 10, and just translate him up a little bit like that. So there's that initial animation of the bounce. Now I'm going to need to do some graph editor work here. Now I don't want translate X, rotate N. These things I'm not actually using. So a trick that I can use occasionally to clear out those channels that aren't of interest to me is I'm going to go edit, delete all by type, static channel. And that just basically says, hey, if you've got keys on a channel, but you're not actually animating that channel, go ahead and get rid of that animation. So now I've got just translate Y, just translate Z. We know on the bouncing, the translate Z should be linear. We know that translate Y should be a nice parabola, that it should be arcing up like this and like this. And we know those keys at the bottom where he's touching the ground, we're going to want to break those tangent handles so they can move independently on subsequent bounces. Alt and Shift and then right mouse button allows me to scale my view for value or time. Now, right now I have it in view, normalized view. I'm going to go absolute view so I can see this is the value, this is the time. So it's 20 frames this bounce and it goes about 6.5 or more units high on this bounce. So here I've got my first bounce. And let me just hit play here. Boink. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. I might go a little bit higher. Now, because this is an animated motion trail, I can actually grab the control points in that motion trail and move things around like that, just get a little higher or a little lower, depending on what I want to do. And let's see, I'm going to count the number of frames holding down the Alt key and then using the greater than, less than symbol to step forward frame by frame, or I can step to the next key by just hitting the greater than, less than, or period, comma symbol. Jumps to my next key. So there we go. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. There we go. So same number of frames going up is coming down. Let's check our graph editor, translate Y. Now, I'm lazy. I don't want to have to animate every single one of these bounces. So I'm going to left mouse button, click and drag, copy that animation, and I'm going to immediately click here and go paste. And I'm going to paste a second bounce there. And oh, silly Dave, I got to actually select the control. So there, I'm going to grab that animation, copy, click here, paste, like that, using that right mouse button click. And I'm going to go to my graph editor here and just make sure that on the translate Y, get rid of that there, like that. So he's bouncing along the whole time. So I'm going to key selected there. There's my translate Y. I'm going to grab that handle, move it up like that. So I got a nice parabola. And we do know that his bounces are going to get smaller as he goes along. So I'm going to 1, 2, a couple frames there. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm just selecting those with shift and left mouse button click and then middle mouse button clicking in the middle to move that thing around. Or I can select a region of keys if I go like this and then middle mouse click along the timeline, or I can left mouse button click in that center to move those things around. And you can see my motion trails updating as I make changes. Let's go here, check this. I want each one of these bounces to look like a smaller clone of the previous one. I want it moving faster or slower. So there's that smaller bounce like that. I'm going to paste that, get rid of this key here, delete. There we go. This guy further down the timeline. Right here, moving down like that. Move those keys closer together. Just by playing around with scaling in the timeline. To this graph editor here. I want to make sure that my translate Z is moving at a fairly steady pace, that he's not speeding up or slowing down. Just the translate Y. Each one of those subsequent bounces look like sort of a smaller clone. It's bouncing on level ground, so I know 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Should be the same number of frames going up as coming down. Just tweak that handle a little bit so I have a nice parabola. And I'm just going to keep animating those bounces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I don't know, 6. Let's try that. Key selected. And let's move that translate Y up like that. And take this key here, middle mouse drag. S to key is also a way of taking a key here and moving it down the timeline. Basically, middle mouse drag in the timeline says, hey, I want to operate at a different point in time, but don't update anything in my view. So that's a sort of a handy little trick if you want to sort of copy a position to a new location. And I'm just going to pull this guy down, grab like that, delete that. Linear, there we go. Let's check those subsequent bounces. Pull this guy handle down just a teensy bit. There we go. And then I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Key selected. Edit, delete all by type static channels. Go. There we go. Key selected. Pull this guy up. Just adding those subsequent bounces. Easy peasy. Each one of those bounces looking like sort of the same kind of shape, just a smaller version of it, because the physical properties of this character don't change. And let's go along here, get rid of that, delete, just keep moving those keys along anywhere I have it touching the ground. I just want to add a key like that. Making sure I can select in the middle of the curve and just say linear on all you guys. And I can put another key there, key selected. 1, 2, 3, 4. Key selected. Go here. Now, because I have auto key turned on, I can also just go like 1, 2, 3, and I'm just going to grab the animation control here and see I've got auto key turned on here. If I just move them forward in space, up a little bit, it'll automatically set a key. And I go 1, 2, 3, 4, move back down to the ground like that, forward in space like that, and it's going to set a key there as well. I want to get rid of these aberrant keys, don't need those. Linear, pull this down, just move at a steady pace like that. Grab here, blink, grab these handles, pull them up, get that nice parabola shape. And there we go. And I can scale my view, just Alt, Shift, and right mouse button click to scale. Alt, Shift, right mouse button click, go side to side. All of that is just scaling my view of time and value so I can see my curves more clearly. There we go. There's that bouncing. Last couple of bounces. 1, 2, 3. Key selected. 1, 2, 3. Key selected. 1, 2. Key selected. 1, 2. Key selected. Key selected. Key selected like that. And these more frequent bounces, I'm going to maybe have them start slowing down, losing energy. Grab all of those apex keys, move them up. Grab this guy here, move him up. Because you can see as I'm subtracting frames, break that tangent handle. Make sure those tangent handles at the top are unified and flat. That. Each one of these bounces looking like a clone of the last. Like that. Guy here, boink. making sure that those tangents aren't too square, they aren't too triangular, right in that sort of sweet spot, a nice rounded parabola. And you can play around with sort of exaggerating how much it eases in and eases out to favor that apex. There we go. Each one looking like a clone of the last. This one here doesn't look the same as that, so I got to go and have a closer look at him. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, it feels like he needs to be a little higher. There we go. That's better. Okay. Bouncing out and then checking my translate Z. Bring him up again. That. Pull him down. That. Linear. There we go. And truthfully, this translate, I could actually just do this because he's bouncing along in that direction the whole time. I probably just do that. But he stops bouncing at the very end. So I am going to have him do a little thing where I have him roll out slightly. Don't need my reference editor right now. Don't need my script editor right now. Just need that key selected. Pull this guy here, pull him down a little bit. So I'm going to have him, now that he's hitting the ground and starting to roll, I'm going to have him just starting to slow down and roll out a little bit. Let's see, and let's flatten him for a second. Blink like this and just go like this. So linear all the way along here. Oops, just get this handle like that. And then once he's rolling along the ground, that's where he'd start to slow down a little bit. So that's where I'd start to have that curving shape. You'll see it more when I do the heavy ball. So here's my rubber ball. Bounce, 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 bounce. They're just bouncing all the way out to the end. And you know what, here, I'm gonna give myself the full 144 for a second because I'm gonna show what happens as he comes to a stop. I'm just gonna take this Z key, pull him way out here like this, down to the end, flatten him, and I'm going to pull him to about here, letting that curve, that gentle curve, come until he finally comes to a stop. Because once he starts to roll, start to lose energy pretty quickly. And then my translate Y, once he stops bouncing, this guy here, let's go ahead and flatten him out. 1, 2. Go. I could maybe have a teeny little bounce at the very end. Let's see here, break that tangent handle. Like that. Like that. Tricky though. There we go. Let's see what that looks like. And that motion trail, it only goes to frame 100. So I'm going to select him there and just say, give me a motion trail. Goes all the way to the end. And there we go. So here's my animation on that ball coming to a stop. Let's see. Bounce, 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 bounce. I feel like he needs to roll out just a little bit more. So I'm just going to grab that main control there. And that's where having that button handy is really helpful because I don't even need to see the ball to be able to select that animation control there. Let's try that. Bounce, 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 bounce. Stop. Okay, so there's my rubber ball. Now, I do want to have some squash and stretch. And because I have this squash and stretch sort of button to select it, I don't actually need to see that squash and stretch control, but I'm going to turn it on so you can see it here. And so on my first frame, I'm going to key just the squash, just the rotate, go S to key selected. And those are the only two channels that I'm going to be using on the squash and stretch control. And for my launch off, I'm going to go in close here, and I'm going to bookmark this view because this is sort of the composition that I want when I go to Playblast. So I'm going to say, hey, bookmark that view. That way, as I'm moving around and looking at my scene, I can always go back here and say view, bookmarks, camera view 1, there like that, and pop back to that. And I can edit it too. I can say bookmarks, edit bookmarks, and I'm going to call that camera view 1. I'm just going to call it Playblast, or actually let's call it ShotCam. So this is the camera that I'm going to use when I go to Playblast my work. Enter. There we go. So let me zoom in here for a second. I'm just going to do a slight amount of squash. So in the negative range, he's squashing. In the positive range, he's stretching. So there's a little bit of squash. Now, because I'm squashing, we can see it's lifting him up off the ground. So I'm going to have to grab that main control and immediately go there and just tweak my translate Z a little, or translate Y a little bit, so he's back in contact. So I'm just going to pull that translate Y down so he's in contact with the frame. Next frame here, I immediately want him stretching. So I'm going to grab my squash and stretch control. And I'm just going to stretch him a little bit. And I'm going to rotate in X so that that stretch is along the path of travel, like that. And then I'm going to go to the apex here, and I'm going to set a key on the rotate and squash like that. I'm going to go back here to the halfway point, so halfway in terms of number of frames. He'll be about 2/3 of the way up the jump, and I'm going to rotate him again so he's following that path. And halfway, I'm going to zero out the rotate like that. Again, I hit S to key, so it keyed all the channels. So I'm just going to go Edit, Delete All by Type Static Channels. And you know what? I'm going to go Control Shift and click, just to have a button that I can just sort of click that anytime I want to get rid of those static channels like that. And so here, rotate him like that, and then zero the squash and stretch out. Here at the apex, I just want him rotate 0. So here he's squashed, he's stretched, he's going up, and then here, I want that squash and stretch zeroed out as well, there. And then coming into landing, I'm going to go to here, and I'm going to want another squash. And you know what? I can just copy this squash here. So middle mouse drag, S to key, and it's going to take that and put it right there. And likewise, I'm going to take this stretch, I'm going to middle mouse drag, S to key, and put it there, and then just rotate it in the correct direction. And then I'm going to go back to here, rotate him so he's stretching along like that, following the axis, and zero him out. Oh, actually, no, I don't want to zero him out, silly Dave. Zero him out, because I still want him facing along the axis, even though he's perfectly round. There we go. So squash, stretch, back to round, but he's still, you can see the squash and stretch still facing along that tangent. Here he's zeroing out. Here he gets back into position. So he's still round, but I have him facing along the path of travel, the path of action. And then here, adjust that rotation a little bit, and there like that. Now, because that squash is getting a little extreme later on, I'm going to do something to sort of soften that a bit. I'm going to go to my my graph editor here, select that main control, take my translate Y, and just bring him back in contact. As you can see, that squash lifts him up off the ground a little bit. So I'm going to go like this. Now, you can actually translate the squash and stretch so it's at the base of the character, and it alleviates that sort of lifting up off the ground problem that we have. But it creates some other challenges that you have to account for. So I'm not going to bother doing that, but that's always an option. Okay, so I'm lazy. I don't feel like animating that squash and stretch over and over again. So I'm going to take this squash, stretch, back to round, back to stretch and squash again. I'm going to just left mouse button click and drag along the timeline with my squash and stretch control selected here. And I'm just going to go copy. And then I'm going to go here and go paste like that. And it's going to paste that squash and stretch animation onto the timeline. Now, my apex is at 28, so I need to move this key back 1, 2, and I need to move this key back 1, like this, boink, boink, like this. Left mouse button click, middle mouse drag. Same thing here, I need him halfway, so I'm gonna go like that. And then this squash needs to be back here at 36, so I'm gonna grab those two keys, drag them back, back one more. And so there's my squash, stretch, copied again. And I can do that for each subsequent bounce. I can just go, because it's still in the paste buffer, just right click on the timeline, go paste, And again, change that timing so that everybody moves back 1, 2, 1, 2, 2, 1, 2, like that. Oh, and there's where I actually want them to be at frame 50, 1, 2. And here's where I want that round key to be, 1. There we go. Paste again, paste. And you know what, since I'm going along and I'm changing the timing, I can go like this, copy that, and paste there. So it's always going to paste where you are actively on the timeline. There's my stretch. And squash should be here 1 frame back. Here's my apex key, needs to be 1 frame back. You need to be 1 frame back. Like that. And you need to be 1 more frame back. There we go. And I can just keep doing that, copying and pasting that squash and stretch along. But you can see those smaller bounces, the amount he's stretching starts to look a little funny. So I'm going to go along and with my squash and stretch animation, I'm just going to take each subsequent bounce and scale it down a little bit. So I'm going to say, hey, all of these, I'm going to select those squash and stretches, and I'm going to use what's called a value operator. And basically, it's going to be, and if you can't see the text here, but you can see me typing it here. I'm going to do asterisk, so shift plus 8 equals, and I'm going to say, give me, 20% of that. So 0.8. I want 80% of, so take 20% of it off. And you'll see when I hit enter, all of these keys will shrink down a little bit. So enter. And then I'm going to say, you know what, and these keys here, let's do it again. So I'm going to do asterisk equals 0.8, and I'm going to copy that, copy it like that. And so I can just go enter, and then I select these guys and do it again, enter. So each time I'm just taking only 80% of that squash and stretch like that. So each squash and stretch gets smaller and smaller as I go down. And if I found like, oh, you know what, my squash and stretch is just too extreme overall, I can select everybody and just do that. Times equals 0.8. So give me 80%, not 100%. And that'll dial everything down. Or I could say, hey, you know what, I want it to be bigger. Let's say times equals, I don't know, 1.2. Give me 20% more. Boom, and it scales up. And you can also do this by selecting those keys and using the scale function here and scaling on the timeline. But I'm going to show you why it's a little tricky to do that. So I'm going to try and click in the middle, and you can see, yeah, I can scale those keys up and down. But if I click here and move up and down, you see they scale relative to wherever I've got my mouse active. So it's a little tricky. And if I don't hold down shift and I scale, it could potentially scale in any axis like this in time. So that's why I use that value operator. So I just have a little more discrete control. And so now you can see my squash and stretch. He's squashing and stretching quite a bit at the beginning, but each subsequent bounce, he's squashing and stretching just a little bit less, which is what you should do. The less height in the bounce, the less squash and stretch you're going to have. I'm going to keep going along here. Copy that, paste it here. You can also do this in the timeline. So I could, and let me just fix this. So here's my stretch. There's my apex key. He should be back 1. He should be back 1. He should be back 1. And this should be back 2. There we go. He should be back 1 more, I think. Let me double check. Blink. Oh no, there's my squash. He should be there. There we go. And same thing, I can paste it again. Paste. And I can go into the timeline and do my work there as well. My timing changes there. I can just say, hey, you guys, whoops, not with scaling, move you back a little bit like that. Move you back 1 as well, because the number of frames gets reduced. Let's see here. There's my squash, stretch, back to round at the apex here. There's zeroed out, so he needs to be 2 frames over. Boink. There's my squash, so you can see it's starting to get crowded. I don't think I can move it together any tighter than that because I've got a key on every frame. You look like you're stretching. You shouldn't be. Zero that out. Zero that out. You should be squashing a little bit. 0.05, let's say. And zero you out. Like that. There's a little bit of stretch. 0.25. Oops. 0.025. There we go. Just the teeniest bit of stretch. And then you and you just zeroed out. So these smaller bounces, I'm not even going to put squash and stretch on at that point because he's not bouncing very high at all. Okay, so there's my squash and stretch all the way to the end. Make sure you're zeroed out. All right, and so let's go back view, go back to my bookmarked shot cam to recompose things here. And I'm going to go ahead and under my show menu, I'm going to go to my Playblast display, make sure I have override viewport turned on, and I'm just going to have NURB surfaces and polygons showing. Now, because my squash and stretch control is a NURB surface, I do need to make sure that I turn off that squash and stretch control when I go to Playblast. I've got my resolution gate to check my framing, but I need to make sure I turn that off as well. And so let's just do a quick file, save scene as, and I'm just going to call this scenes demos. Let's call it. I just want to see if I have rubber heavy balloon start. Right, there we go. Save as. Yeah. Let's go file, and I'm going to use versioning here. Save scene as, and just say rubber heavy balloon V01, like that. .ma. Save as. Okay. Just stop my share for a second. Make sure we're still recording. Yep. Okay. Share. There we go. Share my screen again. Okay. So we're underway. We've got our bouncing ball animated. I'm going to play blast it to check my work. Just go with, I've got QuickTime here on my machine from render settings, everything. But if you don't have QuickTime, use AVI and IYUV codec from render settings. Remember, I've set those render settings up here to be HD 1080, like that. And I'm going to call this guy, let's see, Playblast. And let's see, do I have it in here? Have I done here before? No, I guess I haven't. So I'm going to call it Rubber Heavy Balloon V1, V01. There we go. And I'm going to go Playblast. So the Playblast is going to crank through. Now, ordinarily, I have render off screen turned on just so that it processes more quickly. But I wanted you to sort of see the Playblast as it was occurring so you can see those individual frames. And that allows you to step through it if you want to. And so here we go. There's that rubber ball animation. Now, of course, this file, if I go into my movies here, let's see, my drive, and it's my my Dropbox movies, and let's see, where's that rubber ball, rubber heavy balloon there. You can see that file size, 430 megs. That's huge. Conversely, I'm going to play blast it out as an MOV and show you how that file size is different. But there we go. There's the rubber ball animation, slowly rolls to a stop at the end. That's kind of the behavior that we expect for the rubber ball. It's consistent. Translate Z as linear as it's making those bounces. Squash and stretch is following the path of travel. All that stuff that I've shown. Let's close that down for a second. Subsequent play blasts, I'm going to go ahead and output it as a QuickTime, but for now, that's showing you that. So let's go to our reference editor now, and get these out of the way for a second. So File, Reference Editor, and again, I've opened this a few times, so I'm going to left mouse button. So Control Shift, left mouse button, click, so that I can just quickly click a button to bring up this reference editor. I'm going to grab that Mooly ball, I'm going to hit the plus sign, and I'm going to bring in another Mooly ball because we need 3 of them. So that duplicate reference just says, hey, this thing that I've already referenced, do it again, reference another one of those things. I'm going to name that B here, and I'm going to go ahead, and because I've got these controls to select, my main control and my squash and stretch control here, I'd love to just have a button for this guy as well. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to do Control, Shift, middle mouse, click, and drag, and that basically makes a copy of a button. And I'm going to do the same thing here, Control, mouse, drag, and I'm going to edit that button. And I'm just going to say, hey, instead of the A namespace, it's got a B namespace like that. And then this other one here, this guy, also a B namespace. Shelves, save all shelves. Oh, and I actually want to change it here as well so I can see. Save all shelves, edit, and you know what I can do? I can level to sort of a reddish color there. B main and U, B main as well. There we go. And then this guy here, let's see, edit. Let's do, I don't know, greenish. And this guy here, do greenish as well. There we go. So I can sort of visually tell them apart. So I'm going to click my B main control. I'm going to turn off that squash and stretch control, and I'm going to turn off that tail as well. I'm going to copy the animation of this guy onto the other guy. I'm just going to double click the timeline, copy, and I'm going to click him and go, double click the timeline and go paste. And that's just a right mouse button click to get that. And so now you can see he's animating following exactly what the other guy's doing. I'm going to open up the graph curve for a second, grab my translate Y, and I'm just going to move it physically up so that the 2 balls are moving sort of in parallel. And let's see, play like that. And I'm just going to go ahead and recompose my camera here a little bit. So let's see here. I'm going to go Alt and pull it up a little bit like this. I have the 2 balls kind of doing their own thing. Let's see here. Yeah, I'll separate him out just a teensy bit more. Okay. Blink. Pull him up just a little bit further. There we go. There we go. And you know what? I'm going to just actually, why not do, yeah, I'll leave it like that. Okay, so this is going to be the heavy ball, and I'm going to show you how I change the animation on this guy to make him look like a heavy ball. So I'm going to put a motion trail on him just so we can see what's going on with him as I make these changes. And I'm going to select the main control of that heavy ball here, and I'm going to go into the graph editor. And the big differences I'm going to do is first, I'm going to take that squash and stretch. I'm just going to, or the translate Y, and I'm just going to pull that handle up just a teensy bit more. And here, actually, I'm going to use a buffer curve to show you the difference. So I'm going to take a buffer curve snapshot. So here, I'm going to go say, show buffer curves. I'm going to go over here and say, take a snapshot of my current curve positions by clicking on this button here. And that way, when I make a revision here, you'll see this dark line underneath of it showing, hey, this is what you had before. And I'm just going to do the same thing here. So you can see I'm just taking that tangent, pulling it up a little bit. I don't want it to overshoot. I don't want to go so far that I'm overshooting. So it's a very fine line. But all I'm doing is I'm just exaggerating a little bit that ease in and ease out at the apex. Like that, just a tiny little difference. And so let me swap buffer curve so you can see. So here's what I had before. And let's go like that. So before, after, before, after, before, after. That's the difference between the two. So I'm just going to pull those tangent handles out, and I want to do it with all of them. But you know what? The other thing that I'm going to do is this heavy ball, he's going to not bounce nearly so high. So I'm going to take all of these subsequent bounces and I'm going to delete them and take these keys here and I'm going to pull them way back here like this. Get rid of this key here, like that, pull him back, like that. And I'm going to grab this handle and fix him so he's sort of in that new position here. Oops, it looks like I accidentally grabbed those guys as well. There we go. Okay, so he loses a ton of energy when he first bounces. That all of that power goes into the ground. He doesn't deform, doesn't deflect, instead goes very hard. Now, this is something that's kind of interesting. If you go online, watch videos of like really heavy, hard balls bouncing on rigid surfaces, cement floors, things like that, you'll find like a bowling ball, you can actually bounce on a cement floor quite brightly, quite high. It's quite a bit different than you might expect. So I'm going to imagine that there's a little bit of softness to this ground, that basically the rigidity and the mass of the ball deforms the ground, sends a ton of energy into the ground when it hits. And so it creates the visual that we're going for here of making this ball look really heavy. So much of animation is not about reproducing reality, but rather meeting audience expectations, showing what people expect to see. Uh, that is actually a big part of what we're doing. So because the heavy ball, we sort of expect it to like, oh man, that thing's just gonna bounce maybe once, maybe twice, very little bouncing going on here, and it's gonna come to a stop. So I'm gonna do, you can see here where the rubber ball, and I'm gonna select that rubber ball main controller. You can see the rubber ball I animated, he's losing maybe 20% each time he bounces in height. Whereas the heavy ball, he's losing like 80, 90% of his height with each bounce. That's like 1/10 the height. So this subsequent little bounce here, this would be also like 1/10. And so it probably, whoops, can't do that because that's only one frame. Blink. I'm just going to go like this, teeny little bounce, single one frame bounce like that. This is a little tricky, but I'm going to grab him. Again, rounding out that parabola a little more flat at the top, not completely flat, but a little more extreme on the top. And so let's see here. So there's that hit, bounces and rolls. I am going to have to move his translate Y up a little bit because he's kind of in the way. That, there we go, of the other ball. So both balls start out the same, but react very differently once they're rolling. Now I'm going to grab the translate Z, this guy here, frame him up, and you can see while he's bouncing, just like a bouncing ball or a rubber ball, he would be linear through this part here where he's bouncing, key selected. So I'm going to grab this guy and say, hey, linear here. But this subsequent rollout, he would be losing energy because he's no longer bouncing, but it would take a really long time. So I'm going to take this guy here and roll him out much further. This guy here, I'm going to say, just grab like that. So linear through the bouncing here, and then a long, slow rollout. And he might not even come to a stop by the end of the scene. It might take him a long time to slow down, like that. But let's see the difference between these two ball animations now that I've done these revisions. You'll also notice almost no squash and stretch. Well, I don't have any squash and stretch yet. But what I am going to do is I'm going to take that squash and stretch control, and again, I'm going to just get the rotate Z squash key selected. And I'm going to have a teeny little bit of stretch. So that's the squash control in the positive range, like that. I'm going to rotate him to sort of follow along the path of travel. And I'm only going to give him a couple of frames of stretch. So he's immediately back to round. Oops, not that one, silly Dave. This one here. Figure that out. So it's just when he's moving at his fastest speed that I have like a teeny bit of stretching on there. And then he returns to round almost immediately at the apex, of course. Steer him out, coming around the other side. Here's my squash. I'm not going to put any squash in there. rotate here, find about there, and 1, 2, like that. Key that. Teeny little bit of stretch. So let's see, I gave him like 0.1 there. I'm going to do the same thing on this side, 0.1. There we go. That's it. Nothing else on him. And then once he's on the ground, just back to round again. That's it. Let's see, I'm just watching that play through, see if I like it. You know what, I might. Yeah, I think I like that because you can see the rubber ball, he slowly comes to a stop, but the heavy ball, he's still rolling at the end of the scene. He's still moving, preserving that mass. Let's play blast it, see how they look. Right. Oh, I forgot to turn off my resolution gate. I need to fix that. Oh, right, and I forgot to change my codec as well. So it's super slow. And let's see, probably struggling to overwrite that file. Let's see. There we go. So there's the heavy ball versus the rubber ball. I'm going to go ahead and just delete that file there for a second. Let me replay blast it with my resolution gate turned off. This time I'm going to say, hey, let's go QuickTime. Let's go H.264 compression. Everything else remains the same. Play blast. Oh, right, I forgot my codec is janked up right now. I got to fix that. So it looks like my only option is AVI, IYUV, Playblast. So I guess this is a good opportunity for me to show how to convert that file to an MP4 so that I can look at it and get a nice small file size. So while those are running there, I'm just going to launch Media Encoder. Adobe Media Encoder. And you have access to this probably freely through the school. So you can use Handbrake or other web-based tools to convert stuff, whatever sort of is easy and convenient. But because we have Media Encoder included, you might as well use the free stuff. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, close that video down for a second. I'm going to say, hey, let's grab the file here, and I'm going to navigate to where that file was. So it's in my Google Drive, my Drive, Maya, Dropbox Maya, movies. Let's see, it was rubber heavy balloon AVI. There we go. Open that one. Okay, so it comes into the queue, and for this one, I'm just using, let's see, I think I click, boink, H.264 match source high bit rate. So that just means it's not going to change the frame rate or the resolution or anything. It's just going to do the same thing. It's just going to put it with an H.264 compression. And so once I got it in there, I just hit start the queue. It'll grind through that data, taking that really terrible, barely compressed AVI file that's stupidly huge, and instead turning it into a nice, svelte MP4 that's quick to play, easy to submit. Looks indistinguishable to my eye. So no degradation in visual quality here. So let's go now. We've got that rubber heavy balloon MP4. Click that, and you can see the file size 1.24 megs, much smaller. Okay, so there's the difference between the rubber ball and the heavy ball. Last one that I want to do is I'm going to do the balloon as well. So again, I'm going to go file, reference. Oh, and I've actually got a button. Pull up my reference editor. I'm just going to say, hey, duplicate reference. I'm going to click that one and I'm going to call it C, like that. I'm going to duplicate my buttons as well. So I'm going to, select that button, shift, middle mouse, and oh no, it's sorry, shift control, I think. Shift control, middle mouse, drag to make a copy. This guy here, shift control, middle mouse, drag to make a copy. Edit, and I'm gonna go ahead, make this guy yellow, I guess. And I'm gonna, oops, yellow Dave. There we go. And let's change that command so it's grabbing something with a C name, and edit that one as well. Same thing, C name. Change the color there, blink. And oh, I also want to change the label so I can visually edit. Name. There we go. Save all shelves. There we go. So that makes it nice and easy for me to select which ball. And let me move these guys sort of all over here so it's nicely organized. That. So there we go. Delete static channels. There's my reference editor. There's my 3 balls. I don't need a reference editor anymore. And I'm going to go ahead and select that main control of the ball and turn off the tail. And I will have the squash visible while I'm working on it, but I'll turn that off later. So same thing as before, I'm going to take the animation of the rubber ball and copy it onto the balloon. I'm just going to take that first bit of the animation. So just that launch off and the second bounce. And I'm going to go copy, and then I'm going to select my main control on my balloon and paste it here like this, paste. And then I'm going to go into our graph editor here, and we're just going to move that balloon over a bit. So we're going to move it up, and we're going to move it over. Let's try, just move it over into this space here. Like this, so he's sort of moving ahead of those guys. Up a little bit more, boink, like that. There we go. And I might have to move my heavy ball up a little higher as well, just get him up out of the way. Boink. There we go. Check my framing on my Playblast here. C main, grab him, pull him up just a teensy bit more. Let's see. There we go. Okay. So here, everybody's starting off the same way, except I didn't copy the translate Z key on this guy here. Let me click him for a sec. Where's his Z key? Oh, it's way down here. That's why I didn't copy it. So I'm going to go like this and just put a key on translate Z, key selected. And I'm going to grab these 2 keys and just go edit, copy, copy, yeah, copy. And then I'm going to grab my balloon, main control there. And I'm going to grab his translate Z. And I'm going to go edit, paste. And oh, you know what? It looks like it grabbed. Did it grab everything? No, it didn't. Okay, perfect. So there we go. So there's that translate Z that I need. So there's the balloon moving. And I'm just going to have to shift his. Oh, you know what? It did grab. Yeah, okay, there we go. Just making sure I know what I have selected here. C main, graph curve, move him forward in space just a little bit like that. Okay. And just to make life easy, let's go ahead and put a motion trail on him as well, so we can sort of see what he's doing. You can grab that translate Z, and wherever the character's in the air, I'm going to put a key wherever he touches the ground. So grab that C main control, just a key there, pull that down. But this is where things are going to get really different. One of the things that I need to do for the balloon, and I'm going to select my motion trail, my rubber ball, and I'm going to turn on in the attribute editor for that motion trail, I'm going to turn on frame markers. And so you see these little green dots sort of show up on it. And let me make those really nice and bright so you can see them more easily, like that. And let me scale those frame markers up a bit so you can see them more clearly. So there's those frame markers. So the frame marker is just a feature on the motion trail that you can turn on the attribute editor. So there's your channel box. I just click on attribute editor to pull that up. And I'm going to do the same thing with the balloon as well. I'm going to turn on those frame markers and make that nice and bright so we can sort of see it here like that. And let's scale up the size of those frame markers so we can see them. So currently he has sort of the same animation as the rubber ball. Well, kind of the same. Let me fix over in the graph editor here and get rid of those static channels so I only have the stuff I need. Grab this guy, linear, pull him down like that. There we go. So now the first couple of bounces are essentially the same on both those objects, but I'm going to go ahead and do some revision here because the balloon is quite different. One of the things that I want is I want it to travel in a parabola, the same kind of arc, but aside from that initial starting energy state that it has, unlike the bouncing ball, which eases in and out of the apex and then starts to fall and accelerate, the balloon, because he's so light, he has so little mass, that as he starts to fall, he's going to reach terminal velocity, that basically air resistance is going to keep him from falling any faster. And so he'll move at a steady pace down, and that's going to give this floating sensation as he comes down to the ground. Now, to achieve that, I'm going to just do some specific things in the graph editor here, and let me isolate the balloon visually so we can sort of see that here. I'm going to select this and take a buffer curve snapshot. So here's what it looks like when it was animated just like the rubber ball. And I'm going to go ahead and do some manipulation here. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm going to pull this down like this. So the first half, he goes up, he's launched off with that energy. He reaches the apex and he starts to come down, but then he falls at a steady rate. But you can see it makes my parabola a little triangular. So I'm also going to take the translate Z key that I have down here at the bottom, and I'm just going to manipulate a little bit so he sort of slows down. And I'm also going to key him at the apex, which ordinarily I don't do on any other type of ball, but on this balloon, I'm going to put a key there at the apex so that I have some control over how he behaves. So I can take this apex key, for example, and move it back a little bit to get that top of my arc in the right spot. But you can see here, I'm slowing him down in Z. So he's going fairly quick and then he starts to slow down in Z. The result is that you have this arc that, like the rubber ball, looks the same on this side, but as he's coming down to the ground, you can suddenly see he's just floating down. He never goes faster than kind of this pace here. And so he launches up in the air and then starts to slow back down. I got a key sort of out of position there. I'm just going to move it over a little bit there. Go back to my graph editor. Don't need you. There we go. Take this guy, move him down just a little bit. There we go, roughly about there. Take this handle. Just tweaking those angles a little bit. There we go. Now, because he's going so slow, it means that his subsequent next bounce is going to be fewer frames, not nearly so high. Let's go to my translate Z here. So there he bounces. I can put a key there and translate Z, and then key there. Select it. Don't need that key though. I'm gonna just use this one here like that. And so there's my translate Z, frame him, translate Y, frame him up for a sec. And so this next bounce, I'm going to do the same thing. He's going to sort of launch off a little bit, but on this side, he's going to go where he starts to fall and then slows down. I'm going to get rid of that handle there like that. Same thing with the translate Z. I'm going to take this key, move back a little bit, flatten him out a little bit like that. This mid-span key, back just a teensy bit. Hold this one just a teensy bit like that. And you can see I'm tilting and angling these quite a bit to get the right shape that I want. He's not going to move as far laterally because he was moving slower here. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to have him move slower as well. And then it also means he's not going to roll out nearly as much, this key here, for the balloon to come to a stop, because he has so little mass, basically any time rolling along the ground, he comes to a stop very quickly. Now, a straight gust could send him sprawling and flying, but I'm going to take that key and just move it out a little bit further. Let's have him roll out just a few more frames. And let's grab this here. Let's handle like that. Blend down just a teensy bit like that, and a few more frames out. Open up my graph editor nice and large so I can see it. There we go. There we go. So you can see the spacing along this side is very even. It doesn't bounce nearly as high. I might pull this bounce down a teensy bit more, because I do want the shape to look similar, because again, the physical properties of these objects don't change. Gravity is a constant, their mass is a constant. I might do a teeny little bounce here, just like a little one frame bounce. There we go. Okay, so let's go back out here. I'm gonna check my framing with my resolution gate, get nice and close so we can sort of see all three balls. And hit File, Save Scene As. I'm just gonna increment this up one. Save As, okay. And then let's go ahead and Playblast. This time I'm gonna call it 2. Saved file. I'm going to go ahead and say render off screen, just to save some of the processor slogging. And I'm going to do a couple other little things. I'm going to turn on screen space ambient occlusion and full screen anti-aliasing, just to smooth out some of those jankies. Turn off my resolution gate. Go ahead, Playblast, and cancel that. I'm going to just go Playblast and give it a 2, so I can see. Playblast. And it's going to chew through there. And super slow to play back. Also, you can see I've got my squash and stretch control visible on the balloon. I feel like I need to slow down the balloon a little bit more on subsequent frames. I'm going to give some more frames after this apex here. So I'm going to grab my main control. I'm going to turn off that squash and stretch control for a second. I'm going to take the graph editor here, and I'm going to take the keys after this. I'm just going to select those and move them down the timeline a little bit. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm just going to give it more frames. And you can see now the spacing gets tighter together. And this guy here, I'm going to add a couple frames to that bounce. Let's see what that looks like. Hit play for a second. And I'm going to use my range slider just to isolate the section where the balloon is actually animated, so I can see that over. So everybody launches off the same. And I feel like that second bounce is also too quick, this one here. So I'm going to add some frames there. I'm just going to do the manipulation here on the timeline. 2, 1, 2. And then because I've moved those and my tangent handles are now a little janky, I've got to go in here and fix that. So you can see, here's my translate Y. Got to fix him a little bit. This guy, pull him down more linear like that. Check the spacing, that looks more appropriate. Pull him. And you can see the old buffer curve of what I had previously of my rubber or my balloon bouncing. take this key and move it down the timeline a little bit, just have them roll out a bit more and move a little bit further as well, because it becomes a little bit too much to a stop. Too quickly. Oh, maybe not. Let me see it. Let me hit it, play it at speed. Boom, boom. And you know what? I'm going to do the same thing here where he goes up, and I want a lot more frames on the second half of the bounce. So he floats down to the ground, and then grab my graph editor, translate Y, linear on him like that. Just getting a better view of my curve here. Translate Z, bring him up, grab you like that, grab you like that. And get a key on the translate Z here at the apex. Key selected. Just make sure he's behaving the way I want. There we go. And yeah, you shouldn't roll out so far. There we go. The visual of the curves kind of give you an idea of what should be happening. So if he's moving at this pace and then he's rolling on the ground, he has very little mass, he should come to a stop fairly quickly. That. Let's see how that looks now. And I'm going to increase the number of frames even more on the second half of this bounce. So coming in here, that. Floating it for landing now, and then grab my translate Y, frame you like that, and you. That. And then you two, just move you up just a teensy bit, like that. You like that. So again, he launches off the same, slows down in the second half. There we go. And then probably not as high on this bounce here. Pull him down just a teensy bit more. There we go. There, now it's starting to feel like it floats into landing. Everybody launches off the same, but it's how they behave that tells you which one's the heavy one, which one's the balloon, which one's the rubber ball. I think that's pretty close. I'm going to check my framing with my resolution gate, get as close as I can to the action. And then I'm going to go ahead, Playblast. Now, it's always risky when you're overwriting a Playblast, so I always recommend actually delete the movie file and then re-output it. Here, Playblast. Yeah, Playblast. Go. It's going to render off frame. There's going to be this weird delay because the file size is so silly large when I go to open it in my player. Okay, that's feeling better. That's feeling more like a balloon. Okay, so let's get the full range of my animation set up here. I'm going to check my framing for just a second. I want, because it looks like that heavy ball was just brushing the edge of frame, so I'm just going to pull back a teensy bit more. I want to get as close as I can to the action. That looks good. I'm going to go ahead and lock my, or actually no, I'll just go like this, and I'll say do another camera bookmark like that, just so I can reserve that. Play blast it. Again, I'm going to delete that movie file there. And then play blast, blink, play blast. Play blast the whole thing this time. Now, I still haven't done squash and stretch on the balloon yet, But that's a very fast process because I'm not going to have any stretch on the balloon at all. I'm just going to do a little bit of squash when he hits the ground, and then he immediately returns back to round. So it makes it look like he deforms. Yeah, I might just have a teeny bit more rollout on the balloon. Let's see here. Boink. Just take him, and I'm just going to pull that translate Z a little bit further, like that, just so he rolls for a little bit longer, like that, and a little bit further. And then for the squash and stretch, I'm going to select my squash and stretch control here. I'm not going to have any stretch. I'm just going to have on the frame that he hits right here, I'm going to have just a teeny little bit of squash. And let's do 0.05 or negative 0.05. EST key. And then on either side, he's immediately going to return to round. There we go. So just a little bit of blink and then immediately back. And then here, because he's moving so slow, I probably wouldn't even be inclined to do it, but what the heck, I'm just gonna EST key, EST key, EST key, and then this one here, I'm gonna say, I don't know, negative 0.25. Whoops. Negative 0.025. There we go. Just the teeniest amount of squash and stretch. There we go. And I suppose at that initial state where he's moving, I'm going to go like this. Do a teeny little bit of stretch. So I'm going to say 0.1, and I'm going to rotate him to follow along the path of travel. And I'm going to go maybe 1, 2 frames further along, zero him out like that. Here, yeah. Yeah, okay. Teeny little bit of stretch just because he's moving fast. And that's the only place where he is. Everywhere else, the balloon is floating along pretty slow. And you can see the frame crosses show you how tight that spacing is. We turn on the frame crosses here on the heavy ball just so we can see those frame markers as well. And let's make those red, nice and bright there. So you can sort of see the difference in spacing. See how long that heavy ball rolls out and how long it takes him to come to stop, whereas the rubber ball, he loses energy a little more quickly. The balloon comes to a stop almost immediately. I'm going to turn off key numbers on all those guys. Same with you. I don't need the key numbers there visible. This sort of ends up being cluttered visually. Mostly the visual that I want. Okay, so I'm going to say file, save scene as, call it version 3. I've got everything done. I'm going to go ahead and Playblast, but I'm going to delete that movie. Or actually, no, I'll just save it as a new version. So I'm going to go Playblast. Go, Playblast. A little slow, but it's kind of ridiculous actually for such light character rigs outputting these AVI files. Oof. There we go. There's the 3 balls. But let's immediately go into my immediate encoder. Let's get rid of this guy here. Him, yeah, I'm going to add new file and let's rubber heavy balloon 3, open. And again, same settings as before. Oops. Just say run my queue. And so anything that's loaded in there, it'll convert. So you could have multiple movie files listed in here and convert. It's also important to make sure that once you've done a conversion, you don't want that anymore, remove it from the queue. Otherwise, when you hit play, it's going to convert again everything that's listed there. You don't want that. Okay, and it's done. I don't need Adobe Media Encoder anymore. I'm going to open up my directory there and open, let's see, open file location. There we go. And let's see, that's the AVI. There's the MP4. This is the one I want to look at. Okay, so there we go. There's the final result. The three distinctly different balls, they're all the same size, all the same color. The only thing that distinguishes them is how they move. That's how you can tell who's who. And hopefully it's really evident which is which. All three of them start exactly the same with the exact same energy, the exact same state that they're launched off in. But once gravity and the physical properties of the ball take place, they all behave very differently in terms of how much they bounce, how slow they come into the ground, or how fast they come into the ground. And hopefully they are really easy to tell apart. So that's it. Hopefully, if you are sort of struggling to finish the bouncing ball assignment, this will help give some clarity. I'm going to go ahead and stop my screen, share, stop the recording, turn on the camera, mute mic. Have a great day.